Hey there, Bruce, and welcome back to Misericorde Volume 1. We are about to have our next meeting with the Superior and tell her that, I guess, that we saw a sacrifice of a goat that disappeared and everyone thinks it's a prank, I don't know. Or perhaps that we just, wrote shit in the diary or whatever. Anyway, how's your first day of working in the library? It was more tumultuous than I expected, Your Reverence. Really, no, I wouldn't have expected Eustace to be a particularly difficult person for you to work with. I suppose I have a lot to live up to. Everyone's expectations make me nervous. I sympathise. Try not to let it bother you, however. The most important expectations here are mine. Yes, Your Reverence. Try not to be nervous. You're performing admirably for me so far. Of course, Your Reverence. There's no need to overcorrect for your insolent outburst yesterday. Speak to me as you would anyone else. Yes, Yes. I bowed my head a little. Truth be told, I was getting increasingly frustrated with how arbitrary every little application of tradition around here was. I was being admonished for speaking properly now, after I'd been so rude, honestly. Anyway, we're going to take a little walk. Right now? Yes, it's time you met the accused. Won't it be fairly obvious that we're gone? Everyone else will be busy finishing their morning work or preparing luncheon. Outside of creeping away to the hospitalum in the dead of night, there's no time like the present for us to leave unannounced. I see. The idea did not thrill me. Then again, speaking with James had been my idea in the first place, so I had little room to object. Does anyone else know? Of course not. She opened the door and held it for me. In the best circumstances at this point in time, the Abbey felt strange and alien to me still. Knowing we were attempting to slip out without anyone noticing, however, made the place feel actively hostile. I jumped at every mid-morning shadow and held my breath, passing every blind corner, even though the Superior walked ahead of me. The buildings seemed to be more disrepaired the further from the cloister we got. The wall protecting the side of the Abbey was downright shabby. Bricks lay in the grass and moss was bursting out of the mortar. Is the hospitalum not part of the Abbey? It was built much further away than it is useful, I must say. You're right, you're a bit pale. It had just struck me that I was about to leave the confines of the Abbey, hardly a day after being ripped from my cell. Compared to my organised existence in that small room, the corridors and cloister already felt like a whole new world. Stepping beyond these walls felt like a whole new level of transgression. I'm alright. But not really. If nothing else, it was quite beautiful out here. From here I could see that a thick fog encircled the tour of the Abbey was built upon, almost as if it were nestled in the eye of a great storm. Down the steep hill I could just barely make out the nearest village. The little buildings were situated on the edge of a lake so large that it disappeared into the mist. We're so far from the village. It's rather strange. Truthfully, what isn't strange around here? True. But even the architecture is not what I would have expected. I had noticed, actually, that the Abbey's buildings don't quite line up with St. Gil's plan, or the Romanesque plan. Our Abbey was built in somewhat curious circumstances, I'm told. I would believe it. It was evidently not laid out by a master architect. Do you have any idea why? Because it would have cost a great deal more money to build it properly, I suspect. Money is no object when it comes to houses of worship, surely. That is, sadly, not how it works. Often it falls to a generous benefactor to fund a new community. The great halls of Kirkstall, for example, were paid for by a lord. Bungay Priory was paid for by a countess. Lindbarrow Tor, well, I'd like to know, to tell you the truth. You don't know who actually funded this place? No. I'm not the first or best, and hopefully not the last. The history of our community has not been particularly well recorded. I hope you can improve that once we're free of this foul mystery. I turned to look at the monastery from a distance. Even from far away I could see it was fairly dilapidated, oddly situated and together somewhat crooked. How old is it? I'm afraid I don't know that either. Monasteries serve many purposes. Wayhouses, centres of learning and study, beacons of spiritual guidance for local communities. Lindbarrow is none of these. I would quite like to see it become one day. Another reason why our mission is of the utmost importance. This place is falling apart, Sister Hedwig. I understand. The Superior nodded and we continued walking to the hospitalum. The hospitalum was an odd little building. It looked like a piece of the chapel that had been broken off and placed in the middle of a field, with nothing but a beaten path indicating that it was meant to be part of any larger community. I was somewhat relieved that it was not readily visible until we'd crested a small hillock during our walk. We did not go in through the front door. Instead, the superior bade me follow her around the back of the building. I could see a hole in the wall of the building met the ground as we walked past. This was really a haphazardly constructed place. Watch the stairs, they're quite steep. She produced the same keyring that had taunted me when I heard it in my cell, and it was impossible not to gasp as the door swung open and I saw what lay inside. A stone staircase led down into what looked like a cellar, only there were iron bars splitting the room in half. I jumped as a figure scurried out of the dark corner of this horrible room. He looked panicked, slightly younger than I, to be sure. His clothes were rumpled and his hair was messy. There was a putrid stench lingering in the room, but I didn't want to guess the source of. He might have had a boyish charm under better circumstances, but imprisonment had clearly taken its toll. I was struck with a rush of pity when our eyes met. He rushed forward, throwing himself against the bars and gripping them with bloodied fingers. He pressed his face between them to bring us closer together as he possibly could. Oh, thank God. Step back, boy, if only a little. I couldn't bend these bars. Believe me, I've tried. Nevertheless, his eyes darted between the superior's and my own a few times before he relented. He took a step back and breathed deeply. He really was a pathetic sight to behold. This is Sister Hedwig. She'd like to ask you some questions. Questions? What bloody questions could you possibly ask? Did you kill Sister Catherine? No, I did not. I didn't kill no one. He paused for a moment, looking me up and down, and then turned to the superior. That's it? You've held me here for how long? Had me wait in this shithole while you promised to get me help? And you bring me another nun to ask the same goddamn questions I've answered over and over? Have you no shame? I'm sorry. If you were, I wouldn't be locked up in here. Hedwig, I'll wait outside. Conduct your questioning with some haste, so we can be back in time for luncheon. What do you want? You're sure you didn't kill her? You promise? What good is my word? You've already decided. You have no evidence, but neither do I. Well, it would matter to me. The mouth that lies kills the soul, as it is written. Aye, that they do. Are you a God-fearing man? As much as anyone around here is? Then would you promise me you did not kill Catherine? It doesn't matter what promise I could offer. Promise me. The stable boy recoiled in shock. I was surprised myself. I'd stamped my foot down so hard it had kicked up dust from the filthy cellar floor, and it lingered in the air for a while as the young man and I stared at each other. I promise, I swear to you, I've never killed nobody. Least of all some poor woman. I believe you. Fantastic, and where does that leave us? I have more questions. Of course you do. Why were you here that night? I made the mail and supply deliveries sometimes, from the village. At night? Not usually, no, I'd forgotten something. A letter. I saw it lying in the dirt when I got to the bottom of the hill and came back first thing next morning to deliver it. What was in the letter? How should I know? I'm no murderer and I'm no thief either. Of course, it was a silly question. From where I'm standing, all your questions are worth the same. I want to get you out of here. I want to help you. You lot keep saying that, but if you wanted to help, you could just open the door and set me free. Let me go home. I don't have the key. Then you could call your bloody superior down and have her do it. I can't. She wouldn't. Then how can you help me? This isn't fair. This isn't right. Isn't this a convent? Why do you witches even have a dungeon? You raise an honest point. For extreme situations like this, I suppose. Will I ever see a judge? Or do you lot still do the ordeals around here? I don't know. Fat lot of good your help is to me then. I want to prove your innocence. Who to? To everyone. Your superior says she believes me as well. If you believe me, that's well and good, but clearly something else is keeping me here. Who am I meant to answer to instead of a jury? I'll tell you what I think. I don't think you believe me at all, you or her. I think you're keeping me calm before you put me down like a lame horse. Superior, Mother Superior. The door swung open after a moment. Are you finished? No, I have a question for you actually. Very well. Why? Why can't we just let him go? I would have thought that was obvious. Justice must be done one way or another, lest we risk open revolt from the other sisters. They want blood, one way or another. So what happens next if you don't prove my innocence? The bishop will decide. The bishop? Yes, he has been informed of the general situation. When he makes his usual visit at the end of the month to deliver the sacraments, he will deal with it, along with any other business. So no matter what, somebody is going to be handed over to him. Yes, and I want it to be the right person. I'll wait outside once more for you two to finish up. Do hurry. This is hopeless. You know, Constable? Please, help me to do my best. Tell me the whole story of the morning you were caught. Don't overlook any details. Very well. I arrived late with that missing letter, and I noticed that the sister I normally hand them off to wasn't where I would normally find her. Where is that? The library. She did a lot of writing, as far as I know. Did you check anywhere else? Well, I didn't want to overstay my welcome, especially at night. I wouldn't dare poke my head into the dorms, but she wasn't in the misery what's-it neither. Who'd you end up giving the letter to? I don't know everyone's names. I don't even know your name. It's Hedwig. Sister Hedwig. James Foreman. I wish I could say it was my pleasure. James offered me a grim, humorless smile. I was looking for someone else to give it to for a bit. I don't know the place very well. And you couldn't have just, I don't know, left it on a table somewhere and gone home? Well, that's just it. See, I couldn't. A job halfway done is worse than not done at all, my old man always said. It's very astute. Allow me a little dignity. Thank you kindly, ma'am. I was looking around for someone to ask for help when someone grabbed me and said that they'd caught me. I know you don't know anyone's names, but who? Can you describe her? Oh, she was stern, I suppose. Beaky, if you'll excuse me saying. Angela. Yes, I think I remember one of the others calling her that. It's all quite a blur after that, if I'm being honest. I was scared out of my wits as soon as she nabbed me. What about the blood on your tunic? Blood? What blood? Your tunic was bloodied. That was one of the first things I was told. I left my tunic in the cart. I was only here to deliver a letter. Explain. I hadn't worn my tunic since the day prior, I swear to you. I wasn't wearing no tunic when Angela grabbed me by the ear. We stared at each other in silence for a moment. I wanted to believe him, but that required believing that there was a much deeper conspiracy at work than I could ever have imagined. We were both so still that I could hear the wood above us creaking and bending. It was almost as if the building itself was breathing. Finally, the silence was broken by the door atop the stairs opening. Are you satisfied? We should go back soon. We cannot miss luncheon. Have you seen it? Have you seen my tunic? What's he talking about? His tunic, the one covered in blood. He said he wasn't wearing it the morning he was found. Impossible, I saw the thing myself, it's ghastly. I swear I wasn't wearing it, it's true, damn you. Someone is lying. I've seen it. It is indeed bloodied. And I can have Eustace pull it out of storage to show you. However, I'm being betrayed. Set up. Anyone else could have gone to my cart and taken it. You were only there for a short while, no? Did you pass anyone on your way from the cart to the library? No, I didn't. Then it's just your word against a bloody tunic. I must say, it's not very convincing. You said you believed me, and I do, but I'm not the one who needs convincing, unfortunately. You are. I hear those keys jingling. Just let me go. You'll never hear from me again. I'll run away. Find another job somewhere. You'll do no such thing. Curse both of you then. Some help you are. Is there anyone you know here who you think might have had it out for you? I just can't imagine anyone doing such a horrible thing. No. No? No. Well, that'll have to do for now. I hope you learned something useful, Hedwig, for all our sakes. Why would it be something against him? Surely it'd be something against Catherine too, and he just happened to be a perfect scapegoat. Wait. There's one more thing that may help our cause. Someone can vouch for my not wearing the tunic that morning. Who? Sister Catherine. The other one. I thought you didn't pass anyone on your way in. She was in the library when I went up there to find Catherine. The other Catherine, God rest her. Well, it's certainly not much, but it might be a start. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Has word been sent back down to the village about why I'm gone? Yes. That's good, I suppose. And have you had any word back? I have not. Shame that. He looked utterly defeated, so much so I couldn't bear looking at him any longer. A small part of me wanted to wrench the keys from Mother Superior's hand and free the wretch myself. Ma'am, you had me promise I was telling the truth, and I did. Will you promise to find whoever did this to me? I can't promise that. I can't promise what I don't know is possible. Do you promise you'll try? Please? Yes, I promise I'll do my utmost. We bowed to the poor young man and headed back up the precarious staircase to the outside world. I dared not turn around to see his expression as we left. I could not bear it. Maybe Catherine too was being preened to take over as Mother Superior, and Angela obviously has a problem with that, because she had the same problem with us. So maybe Angela killed her, blamed it on him so that she'd be the next in line to become Mother Superior. That's a bit too obvious, I suppose. The Superior and I didn't speak on the walk back to the Abbey. I was torn between feeling curious about the wide world I'd stepped into and worrying that someone in the stone building ahead of us was watching. I half expected an arrow to come sailing over the wall and strike me dead in the chest. However, almost as soon as the gory image crossed my mind, the fog between us and the monastery thickened. I found this comforting, as if I was perhaps being watched over by God on my righteous quest. How very silly of me. The thought carried me for a while, though. Alright, moving on. That's an interesting building. It looks a lot fancier than our monastery, whatever the hell it is. Luncheon is going to be late today. I see, what happened? Well, a cat happened, I think. After a brisk walk through the grounds, the Superior and I had approached the rectory. According to her, we had made perfect timing. However, the rectory hall was empty when we arrived. Now Darcy was explaining to an increasingly bewildered Superior that Lindbergh had yet another mystery within its walls. A cat? I was roasting the duck when I heard someone rustling, and then some pots fell over behind me. Oh dear. It could have been a ghost, and I was wondering if it was a ghost at first, but then I heard it meowing, and it was probably a cat. That is a relief, at least. Could be both. Anyway, while I was picking up the pots, I think I tried to eat the duck because I heard it yowling and then it ran out. It tried to eat the duck. Poor thing. Probably singed its whiskers. It's a disgusting little creature, and I won't have it bringing the plague in here. I'm not taking any chances. I'm making a new lunch, and that's why it'll be late. Good. Is someone looking for the vermin? Eustace. Godspeed to her. Is everyone else informed of the delay? Nearly everyone was milling about outside the rectory, ready for lunch, so I had to disappoint them. I think Adela and Marta are still in the cellars, and I suppose Moira was on her way to bell duty. Well, it seems like everything's in order. I look forward to the meal. She nodded at Darcy, who didn't seem to be paying her any attention, and then ducked out of the kitchen. Yes, Soup, everything is in order. That's why someone died. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. You're all right, my friend. I just wish you wouldn't pretend nothing is hanging over us at the moment. I understand. Well, what can you do? Some people are just detached from it all. Do you need any help cooking? I have it in order, but thank you for the offer. You were already a big help with the carrots this morning. I gave Darcy a little bow and stepped out of the kitchen. I heard the bell, but there's no food? Oh, there was an incident in the kitchen, so things are going to be late today. No, I know, but the bell just rang, so... Hello, you two. Ready for lunch? No, actually. It's going to be late today, apparently. Oh, no. No, I already rang the... Yes. Whoopsie daisy. I've been so busy today. Me too. Oh, really? What have you been up to? Well... After service this morning, I felt tired, so I took a nap. Oh, no. Were you up late last night? What do you mean again? Oh, come now. I know you. Don't listen to her. She's crazy. Moira laughed and pulled Flora into a one-armed hug, which Flora seemed to appreciate very little. Given that we'd both seen Flora emerge from the Misericorde last night, it seemed that Moira was entirely correct, although I was determined not to take sides. Have either of you seen a cat? Supposedly, that's the villain responsible for the lunch delay. A cat? Would we even need one? I've never seen a mouse here. Darcy said one got into the kitchen and was knocking things around. Got too close to the fire, poor little creature. It's just a cat. Do you like cats, Hedwig? I don't know, really. I imagine they're quite sweet. Oh, of course, silly me, I'm always forgetting. You've never seen a cat? I suppose she wouldn't have ever had one in her cell. Oh, right. Well, they're, a bit creepy. I think. I wouldn't know. The devil plays with the sinner like the cat does with the mouse, after all. Come to think of it, are there any cats in the Bible? Only one, actually. Mentioned offhanded in the letter of Jeremiah as part of Baruch. Huh? Goodness, you really are a scholar. Hold on. What about lions? What about them? Never mind. Oh. I flushed red. I was deeply embarrassed to be bested this way, and especially by Flora. I wasn't even sure she'd actually read the Bible. Wow. It just goes to show that all of us have places we could brush up on in our understanding of Scripture. Indeed. I smiled weakly at the pair of them and took my leave. We just got shot down by Flora. I was feeling quite strained after the morning's stressful events, and I wasn't sure how much more social interaction I could handle before eating. I was angrier than I should have been about Flora's observation about lions. Angry at her or myself, I wasn't quite sure. Either way, I certainly didn't feel up to the task of playing Inquisitor with Catherine. I decided to go for a stroll around the paths between the rectory and the garden. I'd been surprised by Darcy's shocking outburst, relatively at least, as soon as the Superior had been out of earshot, but I was now finding myself agreeing with her. In total, the events of the past 2 days, day and a half really, had been unlike anything I could have possibly imagined while whittling away the hours of my cell. Do you find it mad too? I had seen a ghost or devil in front of my very eyes the night before. Yet here I was, wandering around the Abbey grounds, overwhelmed by the prospect of talking to any more human beings for a little while. The others did not believe me when I told them about the monstrous apparition, and it was that doubt, I think, that might have kept me from unravelling completely. At that moment, the most terrifying prospect in front of me was sharing a meal in a room with someone who, potentially, had stolen a man's tunic to cover up a vicious murder. But then, surely all of that paled in comparison to what I'd seen the night prior. An impossible creature threatening me with its blade before disappearing without a trace. If I held any of these scenarios in my head for too long, the grim tangibility of Sister Catherine's murder, or the possibility that I'd seen some kind of devil with my own eyes, I felt faint. No, I felt worse than faint. I felt like St. Vincent on the rack, having to choose exactly which end of myself I'd prefer to have burned, one thought at a time. As you're writing, are you writing this down, by the way? Not that I'd mind if you did. She might not approve, though. I hear she holds quite fast to her rules, despite all appearances. Anyway, while wandering, I found myself at the door to the chapel. I felt compelled to enter. What better place to collect myself? If anything could ease my mind at this point, it'd be a moment's prayer. With some difficulty, I swung open the heavy door. I strolled through the aisle, taking a moment to gaze up to at the high ceiling, to feel at peace, just for a moment. We have got to stop meeting like this. Sorry, it can be a little shadowy in here. That's quite alright, I'm just learning that I'm easily startled since leaving my cell. Nobody could blame me for that. How are you adjusting today? Did you start writing? I did, as a matter of fact. Lovely. Eustace wasn't too hard on you? No. Liar. That's good. I'm sure you'll end up locking horns eventually, so be ready. Really? Eustace seems so quiet, generally. She is, but it's very easy to rile her up, especially if you disagree with her about something. She and Catherine used to bicker a lot, I take it. Oh, endlessly. Especially about chronicling. Margaret extended a hand to the pew nearest us. Care to sit? Of course. We sat down together. Margaret gazed at the pulpit briefly before continuing. Eustace is very intelligent, and Catherine was too. And intelligent people sometimes enjoy having a go at each other for sport. That's how they show affection. What on earth would Catherine write about that would irritate Eustace so much? I didn't read much of her chronicling, to tell you the truth. I don't think anyone here does. The job's really about writing something down for the people to argue about years later. I suppose if we're living here, reading about it wouldn't be very interesting. Catherine had the same thought. She wrote about all kinds of things. I meant to do that as well, I think. The letters, yes, those were her sticking point. I think he meant to just copy them word for word to mark time, but Catherine would go quite deep on some of them. There was one instance a couple of years ago? Yes. Actually, no, I thought of a better one. Have you ever heard of Reims Cathedral? No, actually. It's a very big cathedral in France. One of the biggest, in fact. It's quite grand. Anyway, it was damaged in a great fire, and Catherine was meant to write that down. Instead, she demanded to write a letter to the municipality over the smallest detail. There was a note in the letter about how the King of France had granted the city an octroi, and that funds for the repairs were coming from a tax on salt. What? That was more or less what everyone else said. Catherine was furious, though. What on earth for? Well, certainly, I think none of us would have noticed, but she had a point. France taxes salt very heavily, and Catherine thought it was highly unfair that the building was going to be repaired with money she said was being stolen from the poor. I must admit, this is completely beyond my understanding. Everyone needs salt, and everyone in France is taxed on it equally. It's how you make food survive for winter, for one thing. But it's an incredibly useful and valuable thing. I dread to think how much we spend on salt here, to tell you the truth, but mercifully, we don't have to pay quite the same way the French do. It just seems like a petty thing to pick at. The building needed repairing. Yes, but Catherine was beside herself for days. I remember her stalking around the halls muttering to herself in very poor French. I'm not trying to do French either, which was meant to be damn your spires or some such. Eustace forbade her to write in a letter to the diocese on the subject. She was going to tell the diocese damn your spires? Margaret threw her head back and laughed, clearly enjoying a fond memory. The diocese, no. She was demanding to send a letter to the king. My goodness. Catherine sulked for days after Eustace told her off for that one. All over a building. It isn't about the building. It's about the very soul of the church, is what Catherine would tell you. She really found it distasteful that the repairs would be built at the expense of the people's basic needs, and wanted to make that known to anyone she could with a say in the matter. That wasn't the only time she got herself worked up over a building either. She'd heard the last remaining ruins of Lighthouse of Alexandria being paved over to build a way fort. And she spent a whole week badgering Adela, asking if she knew enough Arabic to help her write a letter of complaint to the Sultan. I can understand her position, just it seems so fruitless. Sounds rather cruel to put it that way, but Margaret grinned and shifted in her seat to face me. That's the essence of most of the arguments Catherine got into around here. You're not wrong, but... and so on. It sounds quite exhausting. I suddenly felt my stomach drop. Not to speak any ill of her, I mean. Margaret laughed again. You're fine. People said far worse of her while she lived. Angela once accused her of writing her own 12 conclusions. I find it rather touching that she can still put people in awkward positions like this. Her influence reaches beyond the grave. Beyond the grave? Do you believe in ghosts? Spirits? It's quite a question. I apologise if it's a touch strange to ask, just... You're not the first person who's mentioned feeling Catherine's presence lingering to me, or wished aloud for it. It's not a problem, but I should warn you that if this is an extension of your practical joke, the others are going to find bringing Catherine into the proceedings very distasteful. Would you believe me if I insisted that there was no prank? I'd be curious to know what other explanation you could give. If you really saw what you claimed to see, why are you still here? Why didn't you start running and stop only when you reached the next village over? I'm still mulling over the idea of running, to tell you the truth, but I don't think I could. That's interesting. Believe it or not, that makes me slightly more inclined to accept your story. Really? Very slightly. I have no explanation for what I saw, only that I saw it, a real monster, menacing me with a wicked blade. It sounds absolutely chilling. The thing is, if I ran, where would I go? 2 days ago, I hadn't been outside of my little room. I felt like if I left, I'd be experiencing the same confusion 10 times over. Yes, that's a good way to put it. The devil you know. I understand the feeling. But you don't believe I actually saw anything. You don't accept the existence of ghosts at all, evil spirits and the like. I was practically begging for reassurance at this point. I wouldn't say that. I saw something once, in the cellar, late at night. A little devil with bulbous eyes and malformed teeth. In the cellars. But don't you sneak down there to raid the pantry some nights? Well, as I said, the devil you know. And sometimes I get quite hungry. You're pulling my leg, aren't you? Now, why would I do something like that? We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Margaret stood up and stretched her arms above her head. I think that's enough of that seat for now. Luncheon will still be a bit, correct? Let's go for a walk. You and me. Certainly. She walked briskly out of the chapel. I was too slow to help her with the large wooden doors, but she managed quite well enough on her own. She ushered me past and took a step ahead as the door closed. Margaret wanted to lead me to somewhere, and I could not guess where. To tell you the truth, I've always had mixed opinions about the existence of ghosts. I've seen so many things that end up being tricks of the light, figures in the fog, that sort of thing. For years, and the knocking and scraping in the walls here kept me up at night. But these buildings are very old and not particularly well built. That's the sort of thing I'd like to try and comfort myself with as well. But it is a bit different when you're all alone at night, isn't it? Yes. So you do believe me? Perhaps I do. Perhaps I don't. But either way, there's something I'd like to show you. We were walking up the stairs to the second floor. Hold on. We're going to need a candle for this. She jogged to the dormitories and after a moment emerged with a lit candle and a pricket. Come with me. She took me down the hall toward the intersection where I'd seen the sword-wielding spectre. There's no blood or anything here. We already looked. We're going a bit further than that. My heart jumped into my throat. Are we going down to the hall to my cell? Just about. We walked together quietly, for just a little while. This hall always makes me feel uncomfortable. For a moment I felt affronted that Margaret would even dare talk about what this hall might make her feel in my presence, but I suppressed the urge to chastise her. Nonetheless, walking down this hall felt more precarious than my first encounter with the stairs. I take it you didn't come to the hagioscope very often then. Not for your advice, I'm afraid. We arrived at my cell. Margaret handed me the candle and began rapping her knuckles against the stone wall. Eventually she found whatever she was looking for. She inserted her fingers between two of the old stones and pulled. To my shock, the wall swung open to reveal a passageway wide enough, just about, for one person. What? There's passageways all over this place. That isn't what I wanted to show you, though. Follow me. She took the candle back and entered the narrow tunnel. I followed her nervously. Alright, we need to wrap this one up here, but I'm very curious to see what's at the end of this passageway. If there's passages around, there's heaps of ways that people that know the passages can get in and out and murder people and shit. without being detected, you know? And Angela probably knows all. I still think it's Angela. Anyway, thanks for watching, Bruce. I'll see you in the next one.